We're going to go through a little mini course, missions course on God's mission and Christian missions, God's global glory and the unfinished task. So we're going to talk about what is missions. You guys have heard missions and missionaries, and you guys are actually on mission right now, right? And so we're going to just talk about what's the foundation of it. What does that really mean? And how are we actually part of it? So we're going to start defining mission, talking about God's mission, how it's all about him. We're part of it, but it's from him and it's through him and to him. And it's so we can put his name on display in the world. So we're going to start looking in our future sessions. We're going to look at where do we see God's mission in the Old Testament and the New Testament, and being a goer and a sender, and how does it all happen? So we want this to be a discussion too. So if you guys have questions or if you have anything to add, please do that. So let's see. So God is on mission, right? We're part of it, and it starts at the very beginning of the Bible. It starts in Genesis, where we see that he sent Adam and Eve to created Adam and Eve, and he said to go and fill the earth and have dominion over it and make him known, basically, right? And then we can see it through the whole rest of the Bible, as he calls Israel, as he calls us, as he starts he started the church, and we're part of that, and just for the rest of eternity. But if we look at what modern missions looks like, we know there's some of the famous heroes of the faith, right? Who are some missionary founding fathers in modern missions? Can you guys think of any? Do you know any? Have you ever read any? Heard of them? Watch Torchlighters, which you guys should watch sometime.
Oh, like modern day?
Yeah.
Billy Graham?
Yeah, that would be a modern day one. I think he's more would be considered just an evangelist, but he does go cross culturally, and he does go, yeah. There's William Carey, is considered the father of modern missions. He went to he was in India, and then Hudson Taylor started it in China. So there's a lot of ones that started the whole thing, but the term missions and missionary wasn't typically used until the Jesuits started it, because there is a difference between mission and missions, right? If you guys hear that, what do you think of the difference between the word missions and mission? I mean, you might say I'm on a mission trip or I'm on a missions trip, but if you try to categorize them separately, what is a mission and what is missions? What's the difference?
First, from my perspective, missions is kind of missions as opposed to mission is more of a cultural term referring to we're going to go love and serve and tell a specific community about Jesus and love and serve them out of a love for him. Whereas mission is more directly saying there is a task that we have and we're going to complete it.
No, yeah, that's a good way to explain it. The mission and that task that we have is God. It's God's mission, right? And he has sent us to be part of that mission and fulfilling that. And that mission ultimately is for him and it's from him. And the missions part is what do we do as we're on God's mission? What are part of our task, if you will? What are some of the things we do as he sends us out? Yep, evangelize, spread the gospel, right? What are some other parts of that? I mean, that's the principle, that's the main thing, but how do we do that? How do we become part of God's mission in the world?
Feeding the hungry, loving our neighbors.
The practical things that show people love and take care of them. Building the church, planting churches, being the church, right? there's so many different things. And I think one of the things that as we go through the destiny, it helps show us that how can we use our gifts that he created us to be part of fulfilling that task, that mission that God has sent us on. Yeah, and I think one of the most important things in looking at that, the difference between mission and missions is that it's about God and it's about who he is, and it's not about us and what we do. It's really easy to get wrapped up in the task part, right? Like, okay, how many people did we tell about Jesus? How many churches have we planted? How many missions projects have we done? How many trips have we been on? All of those things. We sometimes can get, I mean, even when we're planning for Ocean's Edge things, like there's so many opportunities and there's so many practical needs that need to be met, right? But we want to be able to make sure that it never becomes about us and what we're accomplishing, but it's always about God. And like, he's our motivator. He's the one who makes it possible. He's the one who's called us. And we just have to keep him at the center and remembering who he is and who we are in the big picture. Like the God's mission is his redemptive and historical initiative to make his name known, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't know why he does it this way, but he brings us in to be part of that, and it's a huge privilege, and it's just amazing that he does it with imperfect people and selfish people that get it wrong a lot of times, but he does. He calls us, and he's continuing to refine us and shape us. But it's important to remember who it's all about, and it's not about the task so much as making God known, making his glory known in the entire world. You know, and it starts with our neighbors, and it starts with our friends and family, and then our communities, and then the rest of the world. So it started with the William Carey and the Hudson Taylor and the Cameron Sound and the Wycliffe Townsend and the Wycliffe Bible translators. You know, that's how a lot of it was launched. But there's been changes. You know, a lot of the missions was sent out from the U.S. and Europe originally. But there's been a major shift going on. And where do we see a lot of missionaries and people being sent out from now? Have you guys? Yeah, from Brazil. Middle East. There's a lot of coming out of Korea. What? I said Korea. Korea, yeah. Out of Korea and Latin America, and that's where the major goers are coming from now, actually. Those who are going out, and they're not so much from Europe and the US anymore. And so that's gonna affect strategy to a point as well. So we just have to remember that there's shifts in the global with the globalization, and the new realities are going to make us have to like kind of rethink the way we do things. Like one of the things Ocean's Edge is excited about, our heart and vision is to send people out, to send out Latinos to the unreached people groups, and to send out anybody, but we're in Latin America, and so it's like there's the most unreached people groups are in the 1040 window, as a lot of you have probably heard about. But in that area, there are a lot of the warmer cultures, which is a Latin culture, right? And we're going to talk a little bit more about different cultures and hot and cold climate and relational and task oriented and those differences. But a lot of the overlap, similar culture types are the Latin American culture, and that's it's an exciting thing. They look more like they have that family focus, that orientation, and so that's exciting to be part. But that's just another reality that is happening in the missions world. Yeah, I think that the most important thing is just to remember that the core, it has to be God himself, you know, who it's all about, and see missions in the context of God's redemptive plan. And it keeps us focused on the main thing too, right? The goal is to show Christ's love to every single person we come in contact with, so that every part of our life is putting him on display in the world. And it's not about us, it's not about making ourselves feel good for helping people. I mean, it feels great to help people, right? But the reason we do it is because we want them to fall in love with God and to worship him forever. And I like Piper's quote where he says the reason missions exist is because worship doesn't. And that's our focus, is to bring in forever worshipers. And he's the one who calls us, and he's the one who's gonna make it happen. And it's all about him. So what are some, I guess, experiences that you guys have had with missions in your church, or like how people have viewed missions, or how you have, or how you see that your churches or your past experiences with what missions is all about? I mean, for some people, it's just going to be going to Africa or Haiti and helping. And some people, it's going to be in their own backyard. But what are your guys' experiences before this trip?
As a part of a campus ministry at Penn State, while I went to school there, and especially in the fall semester, we were really intentional about like going out and setting up events, or like just bringing out like strike ball or something on campus to invite people to just hang out, or like gave out free pizza. That was a big one. People like that.
Pizza's good.
You know, they'll come hang out, maybe watch you worship for a little bit, they get free pizza. But trying to build relationships with people through which the love of Christ can be displayed, and that sort of thing. I've also never been outside the country before this trip, so most of what missions is like has been relationship building, and not always like just ministry in like talking about Jesus and the gospel, but having ministry be the way that people are treated, and having that be a testimony unto itself of what God is, by striving to reflect it in the way that we can be taught to treat.
Which is cool though, is that those same things, the being relational and just getting to know them and showing them Christ's love, wherever you go, you're doing that same thing. Like you might be in a different country, but you're still doing what you did in your hometown, you know, if you're living life on mission, living God's mission, you know. So, my sending church, in order to even apply for to be supported by my church, they wanted to make sure you were already doing what you said you were going to go do. So it's like, are you reaching out to your community now? Are you trying to engage the culture of the people you say you want to go love? And so it's like, it's not about where you are necessarily, you know, it's like God calls you. If you're a mom, if you're homeschooling, if you're a teacher, if you're whatever you're doing in whatever capacity, it's like God's called you right then and there in that moment at the cashier register, whether you're the checkout person or you're the one going through the line. Like, how can we just show Christ's love? You know, maybe one day it's patience, maybe one day it's taking somebody a meal, maybe one day it's praying for somebody. You know, it's just gonna look different everywhere. But God's called us to be part of his mission wherever we are, everywhere. So anybody else have any other experiences either other missions trips or like preconceived notions of what missions is, or anything else you want to share?
Yeah, I've just learned a lot just working with local ministries and coming alongside them in their vision for the greater ministry of that community. And I've always thought the missions were overseas or something like that, but last fall I went back home for a season, and I was with a bunch of roommates, and one of them was Drew, and we just go to Taco Bell on Monday nights and hang out with the homeless people and feed them and pray over them and encourage them. And it was just really beautiful the relationship we got to build with them, and learning that that is just what life is. Life is on this.
Mhm. Oh, that's cool. It's not an event, right? And it's not a location, and it's not a trip. It's a life, and it's not our mission. It's God's mission that we're called to be part of. It's a life we're called to, as He calls us to Himself, and as we become His followers. That's what our life looks like, and sometimes it might change a lot. Like the disciples were called, they left their fishing maybe only for a few years. I don't know, someone probably maybe went back, I don't know, but it's like they were willing to do whatever it was in whatever capacity, and it just means being surrendered and walking with Him in ways that He's called you to.
One experience I've had, which this reminds me a lot of, is that it's not a culture either. When I think I've learned being on the missions field for so long that Americans, because we're from America, but like every culture has a way of doing things or what's acceptable in their culture. And, there's stories of, American missionaries going to Africa and saying you can't use drums to worship. But drums are such a big part of their culture that saying you can't use drums was really converting them to an American style, or those missionaries' style of worship, and telling them to reject their culture. So I think when we define missions, we have to really define what is truly just God, that passes all time, passes all cultures, passes all people stuff, and what we're bringing into it, and be really careful. Like I know even I don't know if we're going to get to this, but like even when they decided it was okay to dress like the locals, like for the missionaries, that missionaries could wear what the Indians were wearing. They could wear what the people in China wore. They could wear their dress. That was a big transition.
Yeah, it transcends culture, and I mean, there is a point where you're considerate of the culture and you learn to live within the culture, but and that's not what you're saying. You were saying that you don't try to transform their religious culture, to match your experience of what Christianity has looked like since you grew up in a completely different context and culture and all of that.
Just to clarify too, like the difference is like in Africa, they wear beads because it's witchcraft. So like we wear beads like no big deal, so I mean, that's like one thing, like culturally, we shouldn't wear beads when we're in Africa, because what it's communicating is that we believe in witchcraft, so it's like there's parts of the culture we have to reject, and there's parts of the culture that we need to adapt to, but it's a biblical base, right?
No, and it's not getting distracted by all those little things. I mean, you could go into days and days worth of talking about contextualization and all that stuff. That's not the point for now, but which are still kind of fun conversations, but yeah, and it's like not just making sure that the basis for missions, and the way that you engage the culture is theologically sound, which is going to be like, how do we love people, and how do we make God's glory known? How do we bring in, worshipers? So yep, God's mission is our involvement in God's great mission, right? And it is a privilege, and it's fun. It's hard sometimes, but it's fun because that's what we're created for. We're created to worship God. We're created to glorify Him, and as His followers, we're called to bring others in. And what's more exciting than somebody seeing God and just loving Him?